So Elon Musk is talking about auditing the Fed, gold revaluation is being talked about, and gold is in the news. Gold is never in the news. So if you haven't been watching anything revolving that, that's what we're getting into. At the end of this video, I actually did a chart comparison of comparing gold to silver to stocks to see how they actually performed since the beginning of the century, 2000 to now, and the results might surprise you. So obviously, Elon Musk has been going into multiple government agencies and just looking at all the waste, the overspending, and the corruption. His next target could be Fort Knox, although not the only place where gold is kept, but it is definitely a very large and popular place where a lot of gold should be. So let's first talk about what gold has been doing this year so far. Essentially, straight up. Why? Well, we could also look at central bank purchases of the yellow metal, and also borrowing costs have been skyrocketing for not only GLD, which is essentially paper gold, or SLV, which is essentially paper silver. So looking at that chart of how these purchases are completely skyrocketing, starting at the end of 2024, you could kind of see why gold has been jumping. Because these central banks are buying hand over fist. I've even saw that Russia might be starting to stack silver. And the thing behind this borrowing cost spike, essentially, if you're trying to, who would borrow this paper metals? Well, if you're trying to short sell or bet that a price is going to go down, you have to borrow those shares. So that's what a lot of it would be relating to. Short sellers trying to borrow it. And these borrowing costs are jumping up. So if costs are higher to borrow, these short sellers might be inclined to stop shorting it. And a lot of deliveries are starting to take place. Heck, there's a ton of gold being moved from London to America. And all of this timing is just very interesting of how we're going to start looking into Fort Knox when all of this stuff is kind of happening behind the scenes in gold. And this isn't just looking at Elon Musk on Twitter or even President Trump on Twitter, but it's like the headline media everywhere. The audit with Fort Knox, even gold revaluation. The last time that I remember gold being in the headline news was during COVID or just after COVID, because everything collapsed and then gold started ripping because inflation was starting to happen. And this auditing of Fort Knox isn't a new thing. Ron Paul and Rand Paul have been trying to audit not only Fort Knox, but even the Fed for decades. Heck, Elon Musk has even been talking about he wants to stream the audit to the public to show us the gold. I'll believe that when I see it. And if that does happen, I think that's wonderful. Because we need transparency through all this waste found in Doge. And heck, they're even talking about a Doge dividend of starting to give the taxpayers back their money with all the mismanagement of it. So let's talk about what's in Fort Knox. There is supposedly 147 million ounces of gold in Fort Knox. It's interesting because the last audit took place in 1974, and I believe that was only a partial audit. Before that, a full audit I think was done in the 50s. And even more interestingly enough, that the gold in Fort Knox is actually not technically audited at the current price. Right now, the price for what they're holding is only $42.22. That's only $6 billion, which starts us to talk about revaluing gold, because it's already super low of what they're looking at it of $42. Revaluing it to today's price of right now, it's been trying to flirt with $3,000 an ounce. So that $6 billion on their balance sheet is actually closer to over $400 billion. So what Elon Musk is first trying to do is to make sure that supposedly that 147 million ounces is actually there. Again, interesting timing, how a lot of gold is coming in from London. A lot of people don't think there's any gold there. Another interesting idea is it could be there, but it's being held for other people. So it's not even owned by the government. Now, along with this audit, people are not only talking about don't only look at it, but test it to make sure it's actually gold and to weigh it to make sure that it's solid gold. Now here's the crazy thing, talking about if it does get revalued to around that $400 billion, looking at not only the US deficit, which is $2 trillion a year, but also the US debt of over $36 trillion. So if they were going to use that gold to pay for like all the debts, that would last a couple months. Now continuing on with this gold revaluation, the last time gold was actually revalued, like in price, was in 1934. So it went from a price of $20, yeah, gold used to be that low, to $35. That's an increase of 75%. If they did the same exact thing today, a 75% increase of around $2,900 an ounce today would be close to or over $5,000. And if you are aware of the US debt clock, you should probably look at that every so often, just to understand what the heck the country's involved with. And I know this channel focuses on debt and getting out of debt, but same thing with the government. They gotta get out of debt. Because essentially, the average people, you and me, pay the debt through inflation and invisible tax. So again, looking at the US debt clock, the dollar to gold is almost $9,000 an ounce. This is straight from their website. And looking at dollar to silver is $1,159. So all that shows you is how much currency is in circulation today. Now, could it go up to those levels? Who knows? But it just shows how much inflation took place since the beginning of the Federal Reserve in 1913. And side note, that's also when the federal income tax started. Before that, the IRS didn't exist. So all of this is just very interesting timing as central banks are buying up gold. Gold is moving from London to America. Gold's price is skyrocketing. And then all of a sudden, we want to know how much gold we have. Could there be a reason for it? Again, the whole government should essentially be revamped and look at everything due to overspending and all the corruption. But maybe they want to know how much gold they have so they know what to revalue it to. And as gold gets more expensive and people can't afford $2,900 an ounce, they might start moving into silver. Right now it's around $33 an ounce. So that's kind of what's going on with Elon Musk and Fort Knox, the gold and gold revaluation. Now let's get into what I promised in the beginning of the video, gold to silver to stocks comparison since 2000. So I did this myself. I looked up the price of each of those investments or assets since 2000, and I looked at it every single year, and I plotted this graph to show what $1,000 would grow into today. Technically, 2025 would be year to date, and right now it's kind of the third week of February 25. This might surprise a lot of people because if you invested in gold, you would actually have more money than the S&P 500. Even silver outperformed the S&P 500. Now, I will say that it does depend on the starting point because obviously there was the dot-com bubble in 2000. So if we just shifted that to avoid the drop of starting $1,000 in 2022, you can see how it grew of gold compared to the others. And still, gold has actually outperformed stocks. Silver and stocks have been somewhat similar. Now, yes, if you look at a super long-term chart of like 100 years, you can easily see how stocks have greatly outperformed essentially any asset. A large reason for that would be dividends. If you get income from it, then you reinvest those dividends, then it just grows exponentially. Gold, obviously, is just a rock that it doesn't pay you anything. However, you can also argue that since 2020, we are going through a paradigm shift. Interest rates have been completely falling for 40 years, starting in 1980 until now. It's been plummeting. And then 2020 was kind of the reversal. Interest rates are starting to go up. Heck, even looking at gold compared to stocks last year did outperform. So not as financial advice, more of just like a just so you know type of thing. And I think it is important to at least watch gold because it's almost like a competitor to the dollar, which is a fiat currency. If the dollar is going up, like right now, what's happening to the dollar? Every single transaction that you use and the money that you earn is in dollars, and they're going down in value. Could this continue? Well, looking at central bank purchases, it seems like they believe so. So hopefully this gets you up to speed on what's going on with Fort Knox and gold. We're going to keep an eye on it, and if there is a Doge dividend, we might make a video on that too. So thanks very much for watching, guys. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below, and I'll see you in the next one.